Alright, back like we never left. I'm, of course, Jack Berlin. This is episode 13 of Politically Charged, and if you can't tell right now, I'm extremely sick, and by that, I mean I just have a very minor head cold, but my voice is going to be all messed up for this episode. But that's not going to stop me, because I gotta bring you all the news. I was getting a lot of tweets this week, a lot of Facebook messages, Instagram messages, emails, messages on the website. Jack, where you at? Where's our Thursday episode? Jack, how am I supposed to get my news? Jack, I miss you. I love you. And I heard y'all. I respect y'all. But I was sick. And y'all probably would have unsubscribed if you heard how my voice sound. But I'm back. Better than ever. All hyped up on cold medicine. And you know what? We got too much to talk about. No episode last Thursday, so we've got everything in front of us. So forget the intro. We had yet another insane week in politics. We had the governor of West Virginia switch parties from being a Democrat to a Republican at a Trump rally, marked by, really the most notable part of the rally was some woman who was seated behind Trump wearing an American flag choker, which I'd never seen before. Jeff Flake released a book talking about how, well, pretty much just going directly at Trump's head while ignoring the fact he's supported almost all of Trump's policies. And then Trump's got that pesky little special counsel headed by Robert Mueller, who impaneled at least one, maybe more, grand juries in the Washington, D.C. area this week, really just upping the ante of the investigation into Russia meddling in the Trump's campaign. But we'll get to all that later on in this episode. Do not worry. I want to start with news coming out of Missouri, of all places, this week, where the NAACP issued a travel advisory saying if you are a person of color, please do not go to Missouri. They cannot guarantee your safety. Now, the State Department issues travel advisories all the time, just a little bit different from the NAACP. But the State Department issues these advisories to places you would expect, like Libya, Afghanistan, places that seem to constantly be in turmoil for one reason or another. But we're talking about a travel advisory to a state in the United States, not some faraway land most of us will never see. The advisory is in part a response to a new bill that, among other things, shifts the burden of proof from defendant to plaintiff in court, forcing the plaintiff to show that bias was the sole reason they received the treatment they did. Obviously, this further exacerbates racial tensions in Missouri, a state that's still dealing with the consequences of past events in Ferguson. Now, my personal opinion on this, I think the NAACP is right to issue this warning. God forbid another situation involving Mike Brown, another situation like the one involving Mike Brown and Ferguson was to happen. This bill would make it exponentially more difficult for somebody to hold a biased officer accountable. Now, that's not to say that all law enforcement officers are biased, but just look at the outcomes of some of these officer-involved shootings, and you'll see the bar to convict an officer in this situation is already very difficult to reach, and this bill would only make it more difficult to find and prove the truth. So we'll see what happens in Missouri with this bill. I just wanted to start this episode off with that because it's a huge deal that the NAACP did this. It's the first time they've ever issued a travel advisory, and it kind of got swept under the rug because the Trump family presidency is at it again, demonstrating how bad they are at governing. I'm low-key kind of liking this raspy vibe my voice got going today. But moving on from Missouri to the national stage, John Kelly is in, and the Mooch, among others, is out. John Kelly, in the past week or so, moved from DHS to the White House Chief of Staff position, and he showed his power almost immediately, firing the Mooch, who had only joined the Trump circus 10 days earlier. In actuality, Mooch wasn't even supposed to start serving until, I think, next week, like the 10th of August. So really, he never even served a day. He's the only staffer in White House history to serve negative days in the White House. So we'll see how that turns out for him. It turns out all it took was a former general taking the reins of the White House to start firing people who acted unprofessionally in a job they were nowhere near qualified for. Who would have thought? Kelly's hiring has empowered another former general, H.R. McMaster, who is still serving as national security advisor despite Steve Bannon, a.k.a. Doug Stamper, his attempts to undermine him. Kelly's hiring immediately resulted in the firing of 2 Trump loyalists on the National Security Council, one of which wrote a bizarre conspiracy manifesto type thing, and the other who, surprise, surprise, was completely unqualified for the job, but had the backing of the favorite Trump son, Jared Kushner. Elsewhere in the administration, Kelly, on all accounts, has appeared to have had at least a temporarily calming influence on Trump. He publicly backed much maligned Jeff Sessions, after which Trump pretty much just stopped using him as a punching bag. And Trump has even reportedly started paying attention in meetings. The President of the United States has just started paying attention in meetings 7 months into his presidency. Quote unquote, even rattling off stats to impress his new chief of staff. No word on whether or not the stats make any sense or not, so I think it's probably pretty safe to assume he's just rattling off his electoral college stats, since those are really the only things he seems to care about. For right now, John Kelly seems to be riding the ship, at least, well, you can't write this ship, but he's riding the ship in terms of it being somewhat organized for the White House. But he'll only be able to continue this as long as Trump doesn't undermine him, which is almost impossible, since he does do that to everyone but his beloved Jared. I really love poking fun at Jared on this podcast. So while Trump may be just a little more organized for the moment, it's extremely, extremely, extremely important to note that Kelly shares some of Trump's ideology, specifically on immigration. Like I mentioned last week, during his stint as head of DHS, ICE, which falls under the umbrella of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, is on a pace that has them setting records for how many arrests they've made so far this year. Far, far surpassing what the Obama administration has done. As long as Kelly is enabled by Trump, as he is right now, it only makes the administration more dangerous. Which, I know, I said that about the Mooch too. I was very hype about the Mooch firing, or the Mooch hiring, and the firing, really. But when Mooch was hired, I know I said that he could be dangerous. He was very slick. He gave off that mafia kind of vibe. But in all fairness, I'm struggling to speak. I'm sorry. I'm still sick. In all fairness to me, who could have predicted the Mooch's inability to understand what it means to be off the record, especially as the White House communications director, which now reportedly is being considered as the next spot for one Stephen Miller, C+, Santa Monica fascist. But the one thing Kelly can't help Trump with is the Russia investigation, which seems to just be rolling on despite Trump's best tweets. As I said earlier, Mueller has impaneled a grand jury in Washington, D.C., enabling him to subpoena records and get witness testimony under oath, which is very important in an administration that loves to lie as much as the Trump administration does. And though it does not directly, let me rephrase that. Though not directly connected to the impaneling of grand juries, I think that's the word, senior FBI officials have also been warned by then acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe that they will be called as witnesses against Trump should Mueller need their testimony. I just kind of wanted to throw that in there. I think that's pretty important to know. As of right now, the impaneling of the grand juries doesn't really affect that much, but it does show that the investigation is heating up. I can't really think of a better way to say that. And it's moving away from being more of an annoyance to the Trump administration to a real and present danger for the Trump administration. Very good movie. This could make it more politically dangerous for Trump, even though it already is extremely politically dangerous for him to fire Mueller, as it would be, for one, a PR nightmare for a PR staff that has proven their inability time and time again. And I would imagine firing Mueller, who's acting as the special counsel into the investigation into Russia, which is now impaneling grand juries, I'd imagine firing him would, maybe be construed as obstruction of justice. I'd imagine there'd have to be some way to get to that, which is, of course, an impeachable offense. I want to stress how important it is to know that just because Mueller has impaneled a grand jury, that does not mean impeachment is imminent or even on the horizon, like I've seen some Twitter people suggest. There's a very real possibility this could result in the people around Trump being punished, but it does not mean that Trump himself will be punished. As we've seen in the past, Trump is more than willing to let the people around him sink as long as he's got his lifeboat. So we'll see what happens with that. Transition! how the hell is healthcare still in the news? I mean, seriously, this has to be like the 7th episode in a row. Healthcare has made it into what I have to talk about simply because it's so important. And though it's so important, I'm still getting really, really tired of talking about it, though this is mostly good news. Healthcare is finally dead, at least until September, because Congress currently is on recess, on one of their many, many recesses. Theoretically, healthcare could come back from the dead once again, but Republican leadership would have to flip one vote between Murkowski, Collins, and McCain for them to be able to pass something. At the same time, Trump is poised to make a decision on funding key provisions of the ACA, aka Obamacare, or withholding said funds so that he can blame higher costs on Obamacare dying, when, in actuality, it's his fault. So while all that's going on, issues that were ignored while Republicans fought to strip healthcare from millions and millions and 32 millions of people are soon to be front and center and will require immediate attention because of how important they are. These include things like agreeing on legislation to fund the government and raising the debt ceiling so that America doesn't default on our debt, both of which have proven to be extremely easy. Wait, no, that's not what my notes say. Both of which have proven to be extremely difficult to negotiate for functioning administrations. So the Trump circus should struggle mightily with these two things. I really don't see a way around that for them. That pretty much concludes this episode's roundup of the past week in news. On the other side of this ad we got coming up, we got ads now. We'll get into this week's quick hitters. So listen carefully to this ad. It's extremely important, and I'll see you on the other side of it. Monster. It's good. All right, time for quick hitters. Fox News has suspended host Eric Bolling after accusations emerged of him sending unwanted photos to female colleagues, which evidently this has been going on for a while, and it's been an open secret around Fox News, but they're only acting on it now. It's almost like there's something wrong with the culture over there or something. The Trump administration took further steps this week to keep poor immigrants out of America. In a press conference, they accused the current immigration system of allowing people in who become an immediate burden on society by collecting welfare, which is false. They ignored the fact that green card holders have to wait years, a period of 5 years, to be able to collect benefits, and research has proven uneducated immigrants are the least likely to use welfare. So, another Trump administration point, immediately shot down by fact. The RAISE Act was introduced in the Senate this week by two totally not crazy Republicans. The RAISE Act would slash the amount of legal immigrants who can come to America in half, while prioritizing those deemed to be highly skilled and affluent. Because that's exactly how it should work. The administration attempted to curry favor for the bill by making a multitude of false statements, namely about the burden immigrants place on society, and again, ignoring the fact that the U.S. already doesn't accept people if they are considered likely to require a lot of government assistance to survive. Yet another point shot down. President Trump has directed the Department of Justice, in his favorite punching bag, Jeff Sessions, to essentially investigate racism against white people. I don't know what to say about that. It's all part of an effort that includes the RAISE Act to play to the parts of his base that view diversity as a bad word and may or may not, but definitely are, racist. The UN imposed sanctions on North Korea. It was brought up by Nikki Haley, our UN ambassador. It prohibits the friendly hermit nation from exporting coal, iron ore, lead ore, and seafood at an estimated cost of $1 billion in revenue. They are losing $1 billion in revenue a year because of these sanctions. Also of interest, China and Russia both voted for this measure. There was talk that it would be difficult to get all the nations involved in the United Nations, or on the Security Council of the United Nations, to vote for this, but they ended up getting every member, including China. And Mike Pence has been forced to issue a statement denying his starting of a shadow campaign in case Trump doesn't or can't run in 2020. The New York Times released an article describing steps taken by various members of the Republican Party that they described as unprecedented so early in a Republican administration. People like Pence, John Kasich, Ted Cruz are all said to be preparing. I'm really struggling to speak. Let me start over. People like Pence, John Kasich, Ted Cruz are all said to be preparing to run in case Trump doesn't in 2020, with some even considering running if Trump does run, essentially giving him a primary challenger, which I don't know the historical precedent for that, but I know at least as far back as Reagan, I don't think there's been a primary challenger for an incumbent. So thank you very much for tuning in up until this point, which is the end of this episode. I'm trying to make these Monday morning episodes a little bit quicker, a little bit shorter, so that you can get through them, get a roundup of what's been going on in the Trump administration, in the world of politics, so that you can start the week ready for the insane news that's going to come out of the Trump administration inevitably. And then the Thursday episodes are going to be more in-depth, hopefully mostly conversations with people. Otherwise, if I don't have somebody on, they'll be more in-depth on certain topics, whatever I feel like talking about at that time, because, it's my podcast. As always, check me out on Twitter, @JackBerlin. Got politically charged pages on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, really everywhere podcasts are. Politically Charged will be up there. Of course, the website, politicallycharged.us, is extremely lit, extremely well done. I don't know who did it, but they did a fantastic job on the layout and design of the website. I did it. I did the website. And finally, make sure to check out past episodes, especially the episode I did with Emily Adams. I think it's entitled, "It's Not Enough to Just Oppose Trump," or something like that. I really should have wrote that down. And let's see, there's one more thing. Oh, check out It Can't Be Arrogance If I'm Right, my other podcast I do based on sports, culture, really whatever in the hell we feel like talking about with Nick Talco. We're coming back from a very brief hiatus again. So that's a lid on this episode. Thank you again very, very much for checking this out, for supporting. And with that, we out.